The Galactic Empire had crushed 1,000 worlds. Their war machine was vast, merciless, and unwavering, rolling over civilizations that had stood for millennia as though they were nothing more than dust in the wind. The Supreme Dominion, as they called themselves, had never encountered true resistance. Some species groveled, offering tribute before the first warship even darkened their skies. Others attempted defiance, but their technology was crude, their tactics laughable. The outcome was always the same: another flag planted, another species shackled. Earth, they decided, would be no different. From his seat aboard the Imperial dreadnought Valor, Lord High Marshal Xiphos watched the blue-green marble turn lazily beneath him. A minor world, a primitive species. He had read the reports. A people warlike in their own crude way, but hopelessly backward. No faster-than-light travel. No planetary defenses worth mentioning. Their armies were scattered, organized under various factions, and they wasted resources fighting amongst themselves instead of unifying under a singular, superior rule. Laughable. Xiphos leaned back in his command chair, his golden armor gleaming under the artificial lighting. Beside him, Subcommander Vale read from a data slate, her voice laced with dry amusement. Their most powerful projectile-based weapons struggle to penetrate modern combat plating. Their fleets are limited to their own solar system, incapable of even reaching half the speed of our patrol ships. Intelligence suggests they still rely on chemical-based explosives for most of their armaments. Outdated by several millennia, a chuckle rippled through the command deck. Officers exchanged smug glances, amused by the sheer absurdity of the task before them. This was not war. This was cleanup. Then let them tremble before us, Xiphos said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute certainty. Let them witness the power of the Dominion and understand the folly of resistance. With a flick of his hand, he sent the command. A single Imperial envoy vessel descended toward the planet, its sleek hull cutting through the atmosphere like a blade. The humans would be given a chance, one chance, to surrender. It was protocol, a hollow courtesy, nothing more. The envoy landed in a city known as Geneva, a neutral ground where Earth's governing bodies had gathered in a last-minute conference. The Galactic Empire's emissary, a towering figure draped in imperial regalia, stepped onto the human soil with barely disguised distaste. The air was thick, the gravity slightly heavier than standard, but it was the people that amused him the most. They were so small, so weak. They lacked the bioluminescent markings of the Dominion's elite caste. Their skin was unarmored, and their eyes, so varied in color, seemed filled with something strange. Not fear, but something deeper. The chamber fell silent as the emissary's voice boomed through the hall. People of Earth, the Supreme Dominion has deemed your world acceptable for annexation. You will surrender all authority to the Galactic Empire immediately. Your leaders will kneel before the High Dominion, and your population will submit to integration. This is a mercy. Resistance will only bring annihilation. Silence. The humans did not move. A single man stepped forward. His uniform was crisp, adorned with medals, though the emissary cared little for human ranks. General Elias Carter, Supreme Commander of Earth's Unified Defense Forces, met the alien's gaze with an expression unreadable. No, Carter said simply. The emissary blinked. He had prepared for negotiations, even token resistance, but this was outright defiance. The arrogance, the stupidity, a slow smirk spread across his face. You misunderstand, he said, stepping closer, towering over the human general. This is not a request. This is... Carter cut him off. I heard you, and my answer is the same. The chamber stirred, murmurs breaking out among the gathered human officials. The emissary took a step back, straightening, his smirk turning into something sharper. You amuse me, he said, voice dripping with condescension. Perhaps I should let you witness a demonstration. A single orbital strike should suffice. Would you like to see one of your cities vanish? Carter remained unfazed. He folded his arms, exhaling through his nose, as if barely restraining laughter. The emissary's smirk faltered. That was not the reaction he expected. You think this is a game? the emissary asked. Carter's eyes gleamed with something unreadable. No, but I think you do. The emissary scowled, turning sharply on his heel. He had wasted enough time. He stormed from the chamber, his guards following in perfect formation. The humans were fools. They would learn soon enough. High above the planet, aboard the Valor, Xiphos watched the transmission in silence. He had given them a choice. They had made the wrong one. Begin the operation, he commanded. Across the fleet, warships hummed to life. The invasion had begun. The first wave came swift and brutal. Dropships rained down like falling stars, disgorging thousands of armored troopers into human cities. War machines rolled forward, imposing constructs of metal and fire, their weapons primed to annihilate resistance. The Dominion had deployed similar invasions across countless worlds before. This would be no different. Yet, as Xiphos watched the ground reports, something unexpected began to unfold. Where were the civilians? The streets should have been filled with panicked masses. Instead, they were empty. The humans had not fled in terror. They had not come out to beg for mercy. The silence was unsettling. The first unit marched into a city center, weapons raised. They encountered nothing but abandoned buildings, eerily untouched. A trooper scanned the area, adjusting his visor. Command, we have no visual on hostiles. A flicker of static. Then, suddenly, the first explosion tore through the ranks. A building collapsed, shrouding the streets in fire and debris. Soldiers scrambled for cover, but before they could react, a second detonation sent them scattering. From the smoke, shadows moved, silent, precise. Gunfire erupted. Not the erratic, desperate fire of a panicked militia. No, this was something else. Precise shots, expertly placed. The first Dominion trooper fell, then another. Panic set in as unseen forces picked them apart with ruthless efficiency. Xiphos leaned forward, eyes narrowing. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. Reports flooded in. Communications disrupted. Strike teams vanishing. Entire platoons silenced within minutes. This was not a disorganized resistance. This was not primitive warfare. This was something else. A transmission flickered to life on the command deck. Carter's face appeared on the screen, calm, composed. The background was dark, but Xiphos could make out movement, figures in advanced combat gear, weapons in hand. Soldiers. I believe you said this would be over quickly, Carter said. His tone was almost amused. You're right about one thing. It will be. The transmission cut, and then, across every battlefield, the real slaughter began. The 1st Dominion Battalion ceased to exist in under 7 minutes. Lord High Marshal Xiphos stared at the data feeds, his mind struggling to process the reports. The humans had not just resisted. They had annihilated his forward units with eerie precision. Dominion warriors, bred for battle and armored in the finest warplate, lay in the streets like discarded refuse. Tactical displays flickered red with unit after unit blinking out, their vitals flatlining in real time. It was not just happening in one city. It was happening everywhere. At first, Xiphos thought it was a statistical anomaly, an unexpected stroke of luck on the humans' part. But as reports continued to pour in, entire squads wiped out, mechanized divisions gutted before they could even return fire. He realized the truth. The Dominion had made a mistake. On the ground, Subcommander Vale crouched behind the burning husk of an armored transport, her breath coming in sharp, measured inhales. Around her, what remained of her strike force attempted to regroup, but there was no time. The humans moved like wraiths, slipping between the shadows of their ruined cityscapes, striking with ruthless efficiency before vanishing once more. She had led Dominion forces in a dozen planetary campaigns, but this was unlike anything she had ever encountered. The humans did not fight with brute force or overwhelming numbers. They fought with patience, strategy. Each step forward was met with layered defenses. Each street turned into a death trap. She watched as one of her soldiers, a towering brute clad in Dominion war armor, turned a corner, only to drop instantly, his visor splintering as a single projectile punched through the reinforced plating of his helmet. No wild bursts of gunfire followed. Just one shot, One kill. The humans never wasted ammunition. Her comm unit crackled with static before Carter's voice slid through. I expected more from the supreme warriors of the galaxy, he mused, his tone edged with something just short of amusement. Your troops are dying faster than we anticipated. Pity? Vale bared her teeth, slamming a fist against the side of the transport. Cowards! Face us in open battle if you dare. The line went dead. She heard a faint click beneath her feet. The realization hit a fraction of a second before the explosion did. From the Veiler, Xiphos clenched his fists as an entire quadrant of his forces disappeared from the tactical map. They had walked straight into a minefield, one that had not been there minutes earlier. How? He demanded. His officers scrambled for answers. The humans had no orbital support, no visible logistical supply chains. And yet, it was as if the very ground was shifting beneath their enemies, traps appearing where none had been detected before. A technician hesitated before answering, his mandibles clicking in nervous tension. Sir, we believe they are utilizing an adaptive form of electronic warfare. They are hacking our surveillance feeds, altering our own battlefield assessments in real time. Xiphos's eyes narrowed. Impossible. Not impossible, sir. Just unexpected. As the Dominion forces attempted to re-establish their offensive, another disaster unfolded. Their war machines, hulking quadrupedal siege tanks, equipped with plasma cannons capable of leveling entire structures, began shutting down mid-engagement. Their targeting systems scrambled. Some turned on each other, firing wildly into their own ranks. Others simply locked into place, frozen in a loop of error codes. Aboard the Human Command Center, deep within a reinforced underground bunker, Carter observed the battlefield through a wall of digital displays. His engineers worked in controlled silence, fingers dancing over keyboards, intercepting Dominion signals and feeding their war machines false data. AI override complete, one of his cyber warfare officers reported. We've got full control over at least 60% of their mechanized units. Carter nodded. Turn them on their own troops? Across the battlefield, Dominion walkers pivoted against their former allies. Plasma bolts tore through ranks of stunned infantry. The Empire's grand invasion force, the unstoppable armada that had shattered worlds, was eating itself alive. Xiphos could only watch in mounting horror. This is not possible, he whispered, his voice barely audible over the alarms blaring through the bridge. He turned to his officers, his golden armor no longer feeling as weighty as it had before. What manner of creatures are we facing? The answer came in the form of another transmission, forced onto every Dominion channel. Carter's face appeared once again, shadowed in the dim light of his command room. His expression was calm, measured. You assumed humanity was weak, he said, his voice steady. You saw our wars, our internal divisions, our primitive weapons, and you thought you understood us. But you never studied how we fight. You never understood why we fight. Behind him, several human soldiers stood at the ready, their gear advanced yet efficient, their movements controlled yet lethal. You call yourselves conquerors, Carter continued, tilting his head slightly. But you've only ever fought prey. You've never faced a species that evolved from predators. The screen cut to black. On the ground, the Dominion forces, once an unbreakable tide of imperial might, were now scattered and desperate. Units broke formation, attempting to retreat, only to be picked off one by one. Their warships, still hovering above the planet, found themselves disabled by precision strikes before they could even attempt orbital bombardment. A Dominion pilot tried to lift off, his fingers gripping the controls in growing panic. His HUD flickered. Systems offline. Weapons offline. Then, a final message appeared in crisp human script. You should have stayed in orbit. The ship plummeted. Xiphos exhaled slowly, trying to calm the rage boiling inside him. This had been a miscalculation, a severe one. But the Dominion still had reserves, still had fleets stretching across the void. He would burn this world if he had to. Prepare the second wave, he ordered. No one moved. The officers around him were silent, watching the reports flood in, watching as their forces were eradicated with terrifying efficiency. Xiphos turned sharply. I said prepare the second wave. Finally, one of his generals, an old warrior who had served in countless campaigns, spoke, his voice quiet yet heavy. There will be no second wave. The words hung in the air, suffocating. Xiphos turned back to the data feeds. The battle was over. Not in days, not in hours, in minutes. The Supreme Dominion had never known defeat. Not until today. Not until Earth. And somewhere deep in the vast empire he had once believed invincible, whispers of fear had already begun to spread. The Valor drifted in silence, its once proud hull marred by the scars of battle. The Dominion fleet, which had blackened the skies with its imposing presence mere hours ago, was now a shattered remnant of its former self. Of the dozens of warships that had entered Earth's orbit, only a handful remained operational. The rest were either reduced to flaming wreckage or had fled into the abyss of space, their commanders too shaken to continue the fight. Lord High Marshal Xiphos stood rigid, his golden armor dulled with the weight of disgrace. Around him, his bridge officers avoided his gaze, their usual arrogance drowned beneath the stark reality of what had transpired. They had not merely been defeated, they had been humbled. The humans had done more than resist. They had unraveled the very fabric of the Dominion's military doctrine, turning its strengths against itself with chilling precision. They had reduced the Empire's mighty war machine to nothing more than a lesson in hubris. Xiphos clenched his fists, forcing himself to breathe evenly. He had witnessed countless battles, had crushed rebellions, had watched empires fall at the feet of the Dominion. Never had he known defeat. And yet, here he stood, his forces decimated, his fleet in shambles, his pride gutted like an animal on a butcher's table. A chime echoed through the bridge, breaking the suffocating silence. A transmission request. Human encryption. For a fleeting moment, Xiphos considered refusing it. He had no interest in whatever mockery they wished to deliver. And yet, his hand moved of its own accord, accepting the connection. The screen flickered to life, and there, once again, was General Elias Carter. The human commander looked no different than he had during their last exchange. Calm, measured, utterly unreadable. There was no gloating in his expression, no arrogance in his posture. That, Xiphos realized, was far worse than any insult. The humans did not need to gloat. The battlefield had already spoken for them. Lord High Marshal Xiphos, Carter said, his tone even. Your invasion force is defeated. Your warships are crippled. You're out of options. Xiphos gritted his teeth, his mandibles twitching. If you expect me to beg for mercy, you will be sorely disappointed. Carter exhaled, as if speaking to a stubborn child. I wouldn't waste my time. The Dominion's pride is predictable. But understand this. Your empire's arrogance nearly cost it far more than a battle. If we had chosen to escalate, your homeworld would be burning right now. A ripple of unease moved through the bridge crew. Xiphos knew it wasn't an empty threat. The humans had held back. Even after the carnage they had unleashed upon his forces, they had not struck the final blow. Why? Carter leaned forward slightly. We could have destroyed you. We still can. But we don't want to. Xiphos narrowed his eyes. You expect me to believe that? The human commander gave a small, humorless smile. Believe what you want. But let me tell you something, Lord High Marshal. Your empire has thrived on the assumption that all civilizations are weaker than you, that all species will fall in line, too afraid to resist. You saw our world and assumed it would be the same. A simple conquest, a minor annexation. Carter's expression darkened, his voice taking on a quiet weight that made the air itself seem heavier. You thought we were weak because we fought amongst ourselves, because we lacked the technology of the stars. But you never asked why we are the way we are. You never studied our history. If you had, you would have learned that humanity does not simply survive war. His eyes burned with an intensity that sent a shiver down the spines of every Dominion officer watching. Asterisk, we perfected, asterisk. Xiphos remained still, the weight of those words sinking into him like a blade to the chest. Carter continued, his voice colder now. We have fought wars that turned entire continents into graveyards. We have wiped nations from existence with the push of a button. We have spent centuries refining warfare into an art form. Every battle, every conflict has made us stronger, faster, more precise. We do not just fight to win, Lord High Marshal. We fight to end our enemies so they never threaten us again. He let the silence stretch between them before delivering his final warning. You will leave this system. You will tell your dominion what happened here. And if you ever return, if you ever set foot on our soil again, we will not stop at your fleets. We will not stop at your soldiers. We will bring your entire empire to its knees. Carter's expression did not change, but the weight of his words settled over Xiphos like an iron shroud. The transmission cut. The screen went black. The silence that followed was unbearable. Xiphos turned slowly, meeting the gazes of his officers. He saw no defiance in their eyes, no anger, only fear. For the first time in Dominion history, they had encountered something they could not conquer, something that did not fear them. He inhaled sharply and made the only choice left to him. All remaining forces, he ordered, his voice void of the confidence it once carried. Retreat. As the remnants of the once mighty Dominion fleet limped away from Earth, the stars bore witness to an undeniable truth. The Supreme Dominion had mocked humanity, and in return, humanity had shown them what war truly meant.